So welcome everyone. I'm going to turn things, since we're starting a little bit late, I'm going to turn things right over to um, Bill. Bill is one of poets here at Joliet Junior College. If you were watching the slides, you've seen his many accomplishments. Um, and he can tell you more about himself and the other participants today. Thanks everyone for your passion for poetry and participating and attending. Bill, take it away.
Thank you, Michelle. So this is Joliet Junior College's event, one of the events for National Poetry Month. We try to do something every year, oftentimes a few things. Invite readers. Pam Miller has read for us at the college and done workshops in classes. At any rate, this year, because of the pandemic, we're meeting each other through Zoom, which allows us to have a much wider reach than we ordinarily would. So we have people from all over the country. Cathabella Wilson is a poet from California. John Barrow is a poet from Ohio. John Raffetto, poet from Chicago. Joni Reese, poet coming to us from Texas. Pam Miller, poet from Chicago. Mike Kinziger, member of the English department at Joliet Junior College. Susan Moth, Chicago poet. Patrick Ingram, student in my online creative writing class. Marcy Brzezinski, a poet from Chicago. Martha Kaplan and her husband, Len, from Madison, Wisconsin, poets and professors. Gabriel Costello, poet from my English 120 online class. Shelley Chernin from Chicago, JJC librarians. I don't have everybody's picture, but anyway, we're many people from all over the country and former students of mine from JJC. Welcome. Chris Duffy and his wife, Tiffany, members of the English department, Stacy Santara Murphy, Mike Thune, Jim Baskin. Anyway, I haven't covered everybody, but I hope that we'll get a chance to meet after the presentation is over. I wanted to say that this isn't a scholarly presentation. We're not venturing on any new ground tonight. This is about just a celebration of the work of Lawrence Ferlinghetti, who died a couple months ago at the age of 101, just before his 102nd birthday. He's about a month from being 102. An amazing poet, and what an amazing life he led. The readers tonight have been touched or maybe even influenced by Ferlinghetti in some way. Some by personally meeting him, some by hearing him perform at different venues around the country, some by just reading his works or hearing his works read. So we're going to share some poems by Ferlinghetti tonight, and we're going to hear some stories about him and hear what he meant to some of the speakers tonight, but also we hope to hear from the rest of you as we get into the later part of the program. Ferlinghetti lived a long and fruitful life, and so tonight let's remember him and let's celebrate what he gave to the world. I'm going to go first, and we'll be followed by Joni Reese, and I'll introduce them briefly as each speaker comes up. But I want to start with a couple of reminiscences about Ferlinghetti. I first saw Ferlinghetti when I was in high school. My dad kind of told me about him. He was doing an event at the Free Library in Philadelphia. And so my dad drove me downtown, and it was just a wild scene. There were just people at the Philadelphia Library. it's if you've seen Rocky, you know that kind of museum campus in Philadelphia, where a lot of classical buildings and big steps and stuff like that. And the Philadelphia Library is an awesome place, and like that as well. And there were just people everywhere, and it was all young people. And I was a junior in high school, and this was 1968. Ferlinghetti's book, A Coney Island of the Mind, had come out in 1958, but in 1968, a hardback version of it was published, and he had a couple other books that had just started to come out then too. And he was extremely popular as kind of a cultural figure and as a literary figure. Anyway, the place was just swarming with all kinds of interesting people, and my dad and I couldn't get into to see him. The main hall was filled, so we were in an overflow room, and we heard him speak through a loudspeaker, and it was great. I was so psyched about it. I was so excited about hearing him and just being around the energy of that event, that riding home, I felt like I had just been to a rock concert. I mean, it was that kind of enthusiasm for poetry, which you don't see quite these days. I mean, we've all been to poetry readings, and it's great when we get 10 or 20, but this was like hundreds, I don't know, maybe it was thousands of people, I don't know, but it was a really formative event in my life. And I had been reading some of his poetry before, and became more interested after I had heard him. Anyway, fast forward about 20 years. And I'm in Chicago, I'm teaching, and I hear Ferlinghetti speak at the Art Institute. And I think John Raffetto was also in the audience, though we didn't know each other at the time. Or maybe we did, John, I just didn't realize that we were both in the same place. But Ferlinghetti was a lot older. He was in his 60s now, maybe about 67 years old. He had read from a new book that had just come out called All Over the Obscene Boundaries, not one of his greatest books, but it was interesting. It was Ferlinghetti. It was just, I just wanted to be there. I wanted to be part of that again. It was a very different audience. People more my age, they were no longer young, and it was a much more subdued crowd than it was in that crazy one in Philadelphia. People very respectful, and paying homage to this great poet who did a good job, though he saved all of his energy for his last poem. And I remember the last presentation, he really kind of turned it on and left the room with everybody cheering wildly, and to a lot of applause. And so those are my two encounters with Ferlinghetti. Subsequent to that, I began teaching him in my classes. And for many years, I taught him in my online poetry class. I'm not teaching him this year, only because I didn't want the students to have to pay for any books during the pandemic. So I've arranged other ways for them to access the material that I want them to have. And there'll be links to Ferlinghetti that they can take a look at if they're interested after the program. Anyway, so I'm going to read. I decided that I'm going to read poem number 11 from Pictures of the Gone World, which is a book that he put out in 1955. And this poem begins, "The world is a beautiful place. The world is a beautiful place to be born into, if you don't mind happiness not always being so very much fun. If you don't mind a touch of hell now and then, just when everything is fine, because even in heaven, they don't sing all the time. The world is a beautiful place to be born into, if you don't mind some people dying all the time, or maybe only starving some of the time, which isn't half so bad if it isn't you. Oh, the world is a beautiful place to be born into, if you don't mind a few dead minds in the higher places, or a bomb or two now and then in your upturned faces, or other such improprieties as our name brand society is prey to, with its men of distinction and its men of extinction and its priests and other patrolmen, and its various segregations and congressional investigations and other constipations that our flesh is heir to. Yes, the world is the best place of all for a lot of such things as making a fun scene and making a love scene and making a sad scene and singing low songs and having inspirations and walking around, looking at everything and smelling flowers and goosing statues and even thinking and kissing people and making babies and wearing pants and waving hats and dancing and going swimming in rivers on picnics in the middle of summer and just generally living it up. Yes, but then right in the middle of it comes the smiling mortician. So this is from his book called, wrong way, Coney Island of the Mind. And one thing that I want to say about Ferlinghetti, it's not true of all of his poems, but often they are typographically interesting, in which he uses the whole page, the whole field, as it were, of the poem, you know, and breaks his lines in odd and interesting ways. And so that's sometimes what attracts some initial readers, his experimentation and strangeness in terms of what he does. Okay, I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to move from Chicago to Texas, and Joni Reese, outside of Dallas, author of a number of collections of poetry, winner of a number of poetry and flash fiction prizes, and former editor with me at This Literary Magazine. And I'm so happy that you could join us tonight. You're going to read a poem by Ferlinghetti that's not often performed called Dog, right?
Yes, exactly.
Why are you going to do that one?
Well, there are two Ferlinghetti stories that I remember and have remembered all my life. When I was in 8th grade, Mrs. Levine, who got fired for being too radical, introduced me to Lawrence Ferlinghetti's poetry, along with a lot of the other San Francisco poets and the poets in the New American Tree. And I adored her, and subsequently I adored him. Found this some years later, first edition of Pictures of the Gone World, published a year before I was born. And when I was just out of grad school in Memphis, I was teaching at an Orthodox yeshiva. And I showed the kids all different poems, and I said, you have to pick one to memorize. And Mayer had 4 older brothers who were effortlessly brilliant. And Mayer worked his butt off to be brilliant. And so Mayer decided that he would pick Dog by Lawrence Ferlinghetti to completely memorize and recite in front of the class. And it was an absolute tour de force. And I'm still friends with him on Facebook now. He's 32 years old and just got married, but he still remembers how proud he was of himself to read this poem. And this poem always tickled me because, you know, it starts out in a very small dog way and sort of explodes across the universe into a metaphysical idea of what it means to be free and to be radical and to be a believer. And so I've always loved it, and I loved his wordplay. He's tongue-in-cheek in so many ways, and he's just a brilliant writer. And so I'm going to read this. I've read it a few times for other classes and other places, but this is for Mayer because he did it much better than I can ever do. Dog. The dog trots freely in the street and sees reality, and the things he sees are bigger than himself, and the things he sees are his reality. Drunks in doorways, moons on trees. The dog trots freely through the street, and the things he sees are smaller than himself. Fish on newsprint, ants in holes, chickens in Chinatown windows, their heads a block away. The dog trots freely in the street, and the things he smells something like himself. The dog trots freely in the street past puddles and babies, cats and cigars, pool rooms and policemen. He doesn't hate cops. He merely has no use for them. And he goes past them and past the dead cows hung up whole in front of the San Francisco meat market. He would rather eat a tender cow than a tough policeman, though either might do. And he goes past the Romeo Ravioli Factory and past Coit's Tower and past Congressman Doyle. He's afraid of Coit's Tower, but he's not afraid of Congressman Doyle. Although what he hears is very discouraging, very depressing, very absurd to a sad young dog like himself, to a serious dog like himself. But he has his own free world to live in, his own fleas to eat. He will not be muzzled. Congressman Doyle is just another fire hydrant to him. Dog trots freely in the street and has his own dog's life to live and to think about and to reflect upon, touching and tasting and testing everything, investigating everything without benefit of perjury. A real realist with a real tale to tell and a real tale to tell it with. A real live barking democratic dog engaged in free enterprise with something to say about ontology, something to say about reality and how to see it and how to hear it, with his head cocked sideways at street corners if he is just about to have his picture taken for Victor Records, listening for his master's voice and looking like a living question mark into the great gramophone of puzzling existence with its wondrous hollow horn, which always seems just about to spout forth some victorious answer to everything.
Great. Thank you, Joni. That was a wonderful poem. Yeah, I think you're right about him being so specific in all the details of that poem. It really makes it live. Thank you so much for reading that.
Sure.
Our next reader is that poem comes from Coney Island of the Mind in the section that's called Oral Messages, with other poems like I Am Waiting, which is a wonderful poem that I encourage others to take a look at. And this poem by Ferlinghetti that Mike Hainsinger of the Joliet Junior College English Department is going to read. You're going to read autobiography, right, Mike?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, very good.
Okay.
And you have some experiences with Ferlinghetti too, right?
Yes. I hope everyone can hear me all right. I'm having a hard time hearing with my audio all the way up, old computer. But hello, everyone. My name is Mike Hainsinger. I teach primarily English composition and developmental writing at JJC. And Bill was actually my former professor and Scholastic Bowl coach when I was at JJC. That's through our Scholastic Bowl trips and tournaments. That's how we kind of bonded originally over literature. And I'm very proud to be his coworker now. So
Not as proud as I am. Not as proud as I am.
And so the personal angle of the Ferlinghetti story is after we competed for the state in the state tournament in the year 2000, our team happened to win. We had a player who was, probably in the genius IQ range. And thanks to his efforts, each of us was given a $300 cash prize. And I took that to purchase one of those Ameripasses, they're called, by Greyhound bus, which I later found out Bill had done as well years before. But it basically is a ticket where you can get on and off a Greyhound anywhere you want in the US for a couple months. And I spent the summer of 2000 doing so. And the conclusion of the trip before I had to turn back to Illinois was San Francisco. So City Lights bookstore was on my list. And while I was in there, I just happened to ask a bookseller, is Lawrence Ferlinghetti here by chance? And he was. So I was able to get a few copies of Coney Island of the Mind signed by him. This is when he would have been already 80, and he was still still at least spending some time at the shop. So back in the days of those disposable cameras, I did get a photo, which I'm going to do my best to hold up on the screen, but it's a pretty grainy photo, but I'm there in the green jacket, and there's Ferlinghetti, and there was a young kid there who did not know who Ferlinghetti was, but I told him, really get in this picture and I'll email it to you because you'll appreciate it later on. And so I did that. I haven't been in touch with him since, but I hope he appreciates it. So I did ask Ferlinghetti a question. I felt bad because I didn't know much about his poetry at the time. I associated him more with the other beat writers whom I was more familiar with. But I asked, was this the first place that Allen Ginsberg read Howl outside of City Lights? And he kind of misunderstood me, and he said, well, he didn't write it here. He wrote it in the area. And so that was the one, my one recollection of our little conversation. So without further ado, here is the first part of Autobiography by Ferlinghetti. I am leading a quiet life in Mike's Place every day, watching the champs of the Dante billiard parlor and the French pinball addicts. I am leading a quiet life on Lower East Broadway. I am an American. I was an American boy. I read the American Boy magazine and became a Boy Scout in the suburbs. I thought I was Tom Sawyer catching crayfish in the Bronx River and imagining the Mississippi. I had a baseball mitt and an American Flyer bike. I delivered the Woman's Home Companion at 5 in the afternoon, excuse me, or the Herald Tribune at 5 in the morning. I can still hear the paper thump on lost porches. I had an unhappy childhood. I saw Lindbergh land. I looked homeward and saw no angel. I got caught stealing pencils from the 5 and 10 cent store the same month I made Eagle Scout. I chopped trees for the CCC and sat on them. I landed on Normandy in a rowboat that turned over. I have seen the educated armies on the beach at Dover. I have seen Egyptian pilots in purple clouds, shopkeepers rolling up their blinds at midday, potato salad and dandelions at anarchist picnics. I am reading Lorna Doone in A Life of John Most, Terror of the Industrialist, a bomb on his desk at all times. I have seen the garbage men parade in the Columbus Day Parade behind the glib, farting trumpeters. I have not been out to the cloisters in a long time, nor to the Tuileries, but I still keep thinking of going. I have seen the garbage men parade when it was snowing. I have eaten hot dogs in ballparks. I have heard the Gettysburg Address and the Ginsburg Address. I like it here and I won't go back where I came from. So that begins quite a longer poem, but that's one of my favorites, and I believe the first one that I was introduced to. So thank you.
That's great, Mike. Thank you for reading that. Thank you for those stories about Ferlinghetti. I like that poem a lot. I wish you'd read the whole thing because there are some lines in it that I think are worth kind of thinking about. But one that you read was the one about I looked homeward, but I saw no angel, something like that.
Yeah, a lot of the literary allusions are impressive.
Right. So Ferlinghetti knows a lot about literature. He knows a lot about art. He studies art. He gets a PhD in art, literature studies, and focuses on art. He has an undergraduate degree in journalism, master's in English. So he's quite well read. He's quite cultured. And so when he says stuff like I looked home and saw no angel, it's a reference to that novel by Thomas Wolfe. Not Tom Wolfe, but Thomas Wolfe, an earlier writer in the century, who wrote a book called Look Homeward, Angel, wonderful book, and those kind of things. Now, in the poem that you have, he has a line which is just a really, really interesting and funny line, which is, he says, I wandered lonely as a crowd. Now, that's a really funny line if you know something about literature, and maybe even if you don't, because there's a Wordsworth poem with that title from the early 1800s, I wandered lonely as a cloud, very, very famous. And so he's alluding to, he's connecting himself with Wordsworth, but he's also thinking about himself in the time that he's writing in the 1950s. And I wandered lonely as a crowd. Now, crowds aren't normally lonely, but there was a book that came out in 1950 by a guy named David Reisman with some other people. And the book's called The Lonely Crowd, about kind of alienation in modern society. So it's Wordsworth, it's this sociological study, it's the idea of, it's this pun, it's this joke, lonely as a cloud, lonely as a crowd. So all that stuff is just typical of Ferlinghetti, and that's one reason why I like so much of his stuff. Okay.
One more note is what
Yeah,
he
go ahead.
says. I have seen the educated armies on the beach at
Yeah.
Dover, a reference there to Matthew Arnold.
Right,
Dover Beach.
Dover Beach, and there's a lot of that stuff. We could like just look through it, and there's just more and more. In fact, I was reading over Ferlinghetti today, and there were all these ones that I had looked at, and I realized I didn't catch that the first time that I read this. I see it now, but I hadn't before. Okay, our next reader is Pam Miller, who is the author of a number of books of poetry. Wonderful Chicago poet and fantastic performer. So Pam, what did you choose tonight, and what's Ferlinghetti about for you?
Well, I chose poem number 15 from A Coney Island of the Mind. And I wanted to read that one first of all because some of the other readers we're planning to read some of the kind of longer, kind of manifesto-like poems. And I wanted to sort of provide a contrast and show that Ferlinghetti also wrote a lot of shorter poems that are very lyrical and very, very carefully constructed. And I also love this poem because I think it's one of the best poems I've ever read about the act of being a poet, the act of writing poetry. And in this poem, he literally makes it an act, a circus act. With me, Ferlinghetti was the guy who literally got me interested in poetry. I probably would never have become a poet if it wasn't for him, because I went to high school in the late 1960s, and I remember in English class reading poems by people like Byron and Yeats and Robert Frost. And, being this kind of dumb teenage kid who was really more interested in rock and roll and counterculture politics, I couldn't relate to that kind of poetry. It was like, well, this is just not personally relevant to me. Who cares? But right after I graduated, someone gave me a copy of Coney Island of the Mind. And after I read that, I was saying, now this is more like it. I can really relate to these poems. So because Ferlinghetti opened up that whole door into the world of poetry for me, I was eventually able to go back and really learn to love and appreciate, Byron and Shelley and Yeats and everybody, all kinds of poets and poetry. So I kind of feel like, rest in peace, Larry. I owe you everything. Okay. So, yeah. By the way, pardon my cough drop while I read this. So this is constantly risking absurdity and death whenever he performs above the heads of his audience. The poet, like an acrobat, climbs on rhyme to a high wire of his own making, and balancing on I-beams above a sea of faces, paces his way to the other side of day, performing entreshots and sleight of foot tricks and other high theatrics, and all without mistaking anything for what it may not be. For he's the super realist who must perforce perceive taught truth before the taking of each stance or step in his supposed advance toward that still higher perch where beauty stands and waits with gravity to start her death-defying leap. And he, a little Charlie Chaplin man, who may or may not catch her fair eternal form, spread-eagled in the empty air of existence.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you for reading that poem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sleight of foot, that's Ferlinghetti too. Sleight of foot, just like sleight of hand, but acrobat, sleight of foot, that's great. We're gonna continue with two Johns, John Raffetto and then John Burroughs. John, you've been interested in the Beats for a long time because of kind of a family connection, right?
Well, not really, but just, I mean, I like the Beats. I mean, my uncle was a big supporter. He really turned me on to like Kenneth Rexroth, and Kenneth Rexroth was really probably a mentor for Ferlinghetti and a lot of these guys. So my uncle was probably one of the biggest influences that I had personally for the Beats. And the thing I like about the Beats is that they really took it out of academia and just it was writing about real things. And they were also, you know, like with Ferlinghetti, you know, there's a lot of tongue-in-cheek, as Joni mentioned, and kind of puns, and they didn't take themselves too seriously. I mean, they took themselves seriously, but not,
Right.
at a certain level.
Right.
So anyway.
Did you have a run-in with Ferlinghetti?
I wouldn't say a run-in. That sounds like I was in a fight with him or something. But I was at the same reading as you were in '86, and no, we didn't know each other then. Afterwards, I went to get his autograph on one of his books, and I chatted with him a little bit, and I gave him one of his books to sign. And I also gave him, I had a copy of Owl with me. And to me, it made sense. I thought, well, he published it, so I gave it to him, and he kind of looked up at me, and he wrote his name on there. Then he also wrote Allen Ginsberg's name and handed it back to me. And I said, that makes sense. So like 3 years later, Allen Ginsberg was in town. He was at Columbia College in Chicago. And so I brought my howl, and my uncle was with me too, by the way. And we listened to him. So I went up to Allen Ginsberg afterwards, and people were waiting in line to get his autograph. So I had him sign the book, and as soon as he opened it up, he says, Ferlinghetti signed this. So he says, okay. So he wrote his name, and then he signed Ferlinghetti's name and gave it back to me. I said, okay, that's good. It makes sense. There's a symmetry here. So they all knew each other. So
did you meet him at City Lights Books too?
I saw him. Actually, I saw him walking his dog, which was appropriate. Joni was reading the one about dog. I just saw him walking his dog in North Beach, after hours, and I didn't say, he was from a distance, but I recognized him. Then I saw him in City Lights bookstore You know, maybe this is like in the early 90s or so. And, you know, as I'm sure all of us who have been there, you could spend like a week in that place. And, you know, I was, you know, looking through it, but so I walked through one of the aisles and there was Ferlinghetti and Ginsberg in the same aisle, and they're talking to each other. And I didn't go up to say anything to them. I thought, you know, I don't want to be like, you know, I really like you guys. You know, it's not like a complete fool. So what I did was I just went on the other aisle so they couldn't see me, but I was just listening to them talk to each other. And Ferlinghetti was showing them some poetry that he just published, you know, from City Lights, and you know, and Ginsberg was getting excited and oh yes, it's something, you know, he was whatever. But that was, but I didn't talk to him either one of them that night. So anyway,
what poem are you going to read?
All right, the poem I'm going to read, it's a relatively short one. It's from A Far Rockaway of the Heart, which came out in '97. Also, it didn't, you know, it doesn't have a title. It has a number 40. And the reason I picked this one is because for two things. It's about a painter, which Ferlinghetti was a very good abstract expressionist painter. And it's about the death of this painter, which I thought was appropriate, you know, given, you know, our salute to him tonight. So anyway, here's the poem. When the painter Pizarro lay dying, he looked surprised, as if he had not expected to see so much blue in the landscape of his afterlife. And his eyes got wider and bluer, even though his eyes were already all blue. Old Blue, they called him. A crooked smile tangled his beard, and his hand passed over it, wiping out the smile, a trace of which remained in his surprised eyes, which remained wide open as life left him, like windows on the endless landscape inside him, which he had all his life been painting.
Thank you, John. That's a great choice of a poem. And there are a number of poems that Ferlinghetti writes about artists and other writers through reference or direct, you know, talking about them. Thank you. Thank you for all those stories. We're going to continue with John Burroughs, the beat poet, right, of Ohio. John, tell us about your interest in Ferlinghetti and tell us about your poem that you're going to read.
Well, I discovered Ferlinghetti when I was a young man, like a teenager, and was assigned a poetry project by my junior high school teacher. And I was going through the poetry in the library, and I wasn't really relating to a lot of it. And then, kind of like Pamela was saying, you know, I came upon The Secret Meaning of Things by Lawrence Ferlinghetti, and I'm like, this is, you know, the type of poetry I'm interested in and looking, you know, that really speaks to me. And I found that Ferlinghetti is one of the rare poets that I really felt close to as a teenager, but I also still feel very close to his work now that I'm 54 years old. You know, it still resonates. I was just reading it again today, many of his poems, and thinking, you know, and seeing a lot of these allusions and stuff that I didn't get when I was young. And so it's just like the gift that keeps giving. It keeps unfolding. I keep understanding and getting more out of it, no matter how old I get. So, and I also, today's Earth Day, and I appreciate that Ferlinghetti was very much, you know, a proponent of respecting the earth and respecting his fellow human beings and finding beauty, but at the same time, not afraid to speak truth to power, not afraid to call out bullshit, even from his fellow poets. And which is kind of why I picked the poem I did for tonight.
Okay. Yeah, great.
Populist Manifesto #1. Poets, come out of your closets, open your windows, open your doors. You have been holed up too long in your closed worlds. Come down from your Russian hills and telegraph hills, your beacon hills and your chapel hills, your Mount Analogues and Montparnasses, down from your foothills and mountains, out of your teepees and domes. The trees are still falling and will to the woods no more. No time now for sitting in them as man burns down his own house to roast his pig. No more chanting Hare Krishna while Rome burns. San Francisco's burning. Mayakovsky's Moscow's burning, the fossil fuels of life. Night and the horse approaches eating light, heat, and power, and the clouds have trousers. No time now for the artist to hide above, beyond, behind the scenes, indifferent, paring his fingernails, refining himself out of existence. No time now for our little literary games. No time now for our paranoias and hypochondrias. No time now for fear and loathing. Time now only for light and love. We have seen the best minds of our generation destroyed by boredom at poetry readings. Poetry isn't a secret society. It isn't a temple either. Secret words and chants won't do any longer. The hour of oming is over. The time for keening come. Time for keening and rejoicing over the coming end of industrial civilization, which is bad for earth and man. Time now to face outward in the full lotus position with eyes wide open. Time now to open your mouths with a new open speech. Time now to communicate with all sentient beings, all you poets of the cities, hung in museums, including myself. All you poets writing poetry about poetry. All you dead language poets and deconstructionists. All you poetry workshop poets in the boondock heart of America. All you housebroken Ezra Pounds. All you far out, freaked out, cut up poets. All you pre-stressed concrete poets. All you cunnilingual poets. All you pay toilet poets groaning with graffiti. All you A-train swingers who never swing on birches. All you masters of the sawmill haiku in the Siberias of America. All you eyeless unrealists. All you self-occulting super surrealists. All you bedroom visionaries and closet agit propagators. All you Groucho Marxist poets and leisure class comrades who lie around all day and talk about the working class proletariat. All you Catholic anarchists of poetry. All you black mountaineers of poetry. All you Boston Brahmins and Bolinas bucolics, all you den mothers of poetry, all you Zen brothers of poetry, all you hairy professors of poesy, all you poetry reviewers drinking the blood of the poet, all you poetry police. Where are Whitman's wild children? Where are the great voices speaking out with a sense of sweetness and sublimity? Where the new great vision, the great worldview, the high prophetic song of the immense earth and all that sings in it, and our relation to it? Poets, descend to the street of the world once more and open your minds and eyes with the old visual delight. Clear your throat and speak up. Poetry is dead. Long live poetry with terrible eyes and buffalo strength. Don't wait for the revolution, or it will happen without you. Stop mumbling and speak out with a new, wide open poetry, with a new common sensual public surface and other subjective levels or other subversive levels, a tuning fork in the inner ear to strike below the surface of your own sweet self. Still sing, yet utter the word en masse. Poetry, the common carrier for the transportation of the public to higher places than other wheels can carry it. Poetry still falls from the skies into our streets, still open. They haven't put up the barricades yet. The streets still alive with faces, lovely men and women still walking there, still lovely creatures everywhere, in the eyes of all the secret of all still buried there. Whitman's wild children still sleeping there. Awake and sing in the open air.
Woo-hoo!
That was awesome, John. That was awesome. Wonderful. Where does that poem appear? What volume of Ferlinghetti stuff? That's a later
It
poem.
originally appeared in Who Are We Now? And then he later put it in Wild Dreams of a New Beginning, and then Poetry as Insurgent Art. So I think he must have liked it because he kept reusing it.
It's a great poem. You read it so well. It was great. Hey, can you tell everybody what it means to be the beat poet of Ohio?
Oh, well, it was, I was selected by the National Beat Poetry Foundation. They choose a poet laureate from every state for a couple of years, and somehow I got lucky. There
What aspect
poets from Ohio, but
what aspect of your own writing do you think of as beat?
My love of rhythm and the musicality of poetry. I started out writing songs before I realized the lyric. Later, I started to call those songs poetry. But
okay,
yeah, I think that's the main thing.
Congratulations on the honor. That's really an exciting thing. Well, thank all of you readers. I hope that. Since you're all poets and many of us in the audience are poets, I hope that some of us will be to some younger writers what Ferlinghetti was to many of us. Inspiration, contemporary look at the world, way into ourselves, all those kinds of things. Michelle, is it okay to open it up to other comments and stories about or questions that the people might have?
Yeah, sure. I am not seeing anything in the chat, so everyone should have the ability to unmute themselves and speak up, or under reactions in the toolbar, you can raise your hand and Bill can see those and call on you.
Sure. Does anybody have any comments? Or Bud Smith didn't join us, right?
No, he did not. Not that I'm aware of. But I hope he's okay, and I'm glad he got vaxxed.
Yeah, I am too. I'll send him your wishes. Yeah, I wish you could have met Bud. He's quite interesting guy and poet. Patrick and Gabriel have read his work in our class, and as they have Pam Miller. So if you have any questions about Ferlinghetti or comments, or want to ask students in my class want to ask Pam a question, or anybody about anything, feel free to do so. Is Bill Maher here? Bill, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, Bill. So Bill emailed me and said that he had done translations of Ferlinghetti into, Bill, was it Chinese and Japanese? Chinese. So would you like to tell us about those translations?
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's many years ago, a friend of mine who was an editor of a poetry by monthly in Taiwan. And he asked me to translate contemporary American poetry for the magazine. And Ferlinghetti was among the poets whose work I translated and published. I love his witty, colloquial, and natural style, and learned quite a lot from him in my own writing. And I published in 1999 some of my translation in a book entitled "Let the Feast Begin," my favorite poems in English, in which I included 5 of his poems. In Golden Gate Park that day, truth is not the secret of a few. It was a face which darkness could kill, heaven and dark. And I also put more than 10 of his translated poems on my personal website, The Art World of William Marr. Well, thank you very much.
That must have been just, was it difficult to translate them into Chinese?
Oh, well, poetry translation is always difficult, okay? But I found that his poetry is not really too difficult, because I think he, I think it's closer to people, you know, is the language and also the thinking. So I really like it.
Bill, I'd like to introduce you to Mike Kainzinger from Joliet Junior College's English department, who teaches Chinese and has written an incredible book. Mike, tell us about your Chinese experiences, and do you have any, I mean.
Oh, William, 我很高兴认识你. I spent 2 years actually in Taiwan in Danshui teaching English after college. So I became very interested in the language, and I couldn't be a translator or anything that high tech, but I enjoy teaching the basics to beginners, and then if they want to continue from there, then that's great for them. But that's my niche, is teaching.
You have a book out about
I
that.
do. I have a textbook series that kind of started by accident on YouTube. A publisher found me. It's called Chinese with Mike, if you like to look at it. But
you are quite a famous YouTube performer, correct?
So I had a little bit of a following about 10, 11 years ago, and teaching some basics on a whiteboard in my garage and dressing up in Hawaiian shirts and things like that. So
what was your name on YouTube?
It's Chinese with Mike. There's still a few sample videos up there, but it was a fun experience. And I love Taiwan, and I have 2 children who are half Taiwanese, and it's very, very nice to meet you, William, and also fantastic that you've translated Ferlinghetti to give more people access.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Do you think he has any following in China, Ferlinghetti?
Oh yes, I think so.
Yeah.
I think I translated almost more than 1,000 poems from English to Chinese, and during the 1980s and 1990s, really influenced quite a few young poets. A lot of people really like them. And well, yeah, I think I also writing bilingual right now. Most of my poems are bilingual, and so I'm in the process of editing a selection and anthology that hopefully will be published pretty soon.
Thank you for sharing your story. It's fascinating.
Please share your information in the chat so we can hang on to it and people can reach you.
Yeah, thank you.
Does anybody else have a question or a comment about Ferlinghetti, poetry, poets, contemporary writing, anything? I'd like to ask the speakers, and also any of the other poets in the audience, has anybody ever written a poem specifically influenced by something that Ferlinghetti wrote? or was it a more generalized kind of influence?
I wrote something that,
I haven't done that, but I would consider trying it because when I heard it spoken tonight, it was a different take for me because there were so many different voices interpreting his work. And so it opened up more than one door. His words, of course, are the first opening, but then it's the interpretation. And he has such a clarity of voice as a writer. And he speaks in the vernacular. And because I'm an English major, I love all his references as well. And I think that he does open that possibility to emulate that kind of just tell it the way it is, put it out there, say it.
Yeah, I think that's true. This is Susan Moss. Susan is a Chicago area poet and president of what?
Illinois State Poetry Society.
Illinois State Poetry Society, which a lot of you should check out. And you can also check out Susan's own work. When did you first come upon Ferlinghetti, Susan?
Oh, when I was in high school.
Mm.
Yeah.
Was it taught in a class?
Not that I'm aware of, but I was aware of so many different kinds of writers. And I just would buy my own books and pick them up and read. And, so that's how I got to know about him. And the Beats, I just think they're a fascinating group of writers. And how they live their lives is fascinating.
He's associated with them, but he didn't consider himself a beat poet.
No, that's right.
Though he's closely connected with them in everybody's mind. Cathabela, being in California, what does California have a different take on Ferlinghetti than the rest of the country?
No, I think everyone that I know would feel close to him and to the beat poets too. And I had our dear friend Mel Weisberg, he was one of the poets of the non-existent city, they call themselves, which was Los Angeles in the beat world. And he took to our group in a really big way, Mel, because he felt like what we were doing was a continuation of what they all felt as a community of poets and what poetry was. So I became very close to him. He died about 7 or 8 years ago, but we wrote collabs together and performed together. And I just went in the other room because I got this book, my copy of Coney Island of the Mind, a lot of my poems. I grew up in the New York poetry world, but then I was having children and all. But this was a book that was in Mel's house when he died. And I went into his house and I could take whatever I wanted. And what I wanted was his house to be a museum, not to take anything from it, but I did bring some of his books. And this one is a very yellow paperback of 1956.
Wow.
And it just feels wonderful in my hands.
So many of us own versions of that book. I as a poet, John Burroughs is a publisher, and John Raffetto, who has a book out, and Pam has books out, and Joni does, and others of us. How many copies is like a pretty good seller for a poetry book?
Well, for my very small press, about 500 is like really good.
500 is really good.
Far less than that.
So 500 is really good, and some of us, are lucky to sell 10 or 50, or ecstatic to sell 100, even though we have our basements filled with hundreds of copies of volumes that we published. At any rate, A Coney Island of the Mind has sold more than 1 million copies.
I believe it. Yeah.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine a poetry book?
It's iconic.
Selling over 1 million? 1 million copies.
Impressive.
It's impressive. It's it's mind blowing for a poet. Has anybody, Ferlinghetti certainly known for his poetry, but he also wrote kind of a novel or a long prose work. Has anybody read his novel Her, Her? Not like the movie, with what's his face, Joaquin Phoenix, but Her by Ferlinghetti. It's a wonderful, strange, surreal, very rhythmic kind of prose. If you haven't read it or don't know of it, I recommend it. It's, but like all of Ferlinghetti, there's some stuff that's offensive. So we didn't read some of that stuff tonight, but he's not for every taste, and some of his stuff has aged well, and some of it has not. Though he still feels fairly contemporary in some of his takes on, as John said, the earth and politics and other kinds of things. Anyway, Her, Her by Lawrence Ferlinghetti. Does anybody else have any comments or questions? Patrick, Gabriel?
Well, one thing that I'd like to say is that when around maybe during the late 1980s, early 90s, I actually kind of went off Ferlinghetti a little bit. I felt like because his work is so direct and stripped down, and because of some of the other poets I was reading, I felt like I had outgrown him, because I started to find his work a little too simplistic. But the good news is that more recently, I've gone back to him and rediscovered him and realized, no, this is, it's maybe stylistically very stripped down, but it still does it for me. So Ferlinghetti fandom goes in and out of style, I guess.
I was just wondering if anyone has read Little Boy, which is his last novel, as he called it.
Have you read it?
It just came out like 2 years ago.
Have you read it?
I read it. It's prosy, and it's kind of like a memoir of sorts. And he's got like pages and pages without punctuation. It's not really stream of consciousness, but in a certain way it is. But it's a very autobiographical, because I knew certain things about him. I was just wondering if anyone read it or felt anything about it.
You recommend it?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, it's the last thing he wrote. It was his last. I think he was totally blind at that point, so he was dictating the book and whatever. So
has anybody ever seen any of Ferlinghetti's art?
Just in pictures, not actually seeing a gallery exhibit, but I liked some of his stuff.
Isn't that his art on the cover of In the Time of Useful Consciousness?
Yes, that is right, and that's a great book too. I like that one.
City Lights put out a number of really interesting what were called Pocket Poets series, and they've been published. But you can certainly, one of his most famous was his version of his publishing of Hal, which caused a court case. And he published other works by Ginsberg, like Kaddish and Planet News. I think a lot of us probably have these little volumes, certainly for prices that you don't get today. $2 or $1, $1.50. Yeah. It's nice to kind of treasure some works. Ferlinghetti was somewhat political. His Tyrannus Nix is a strange book that's all kind of
oh wow, look at that.
It's all kind of written. And it has pages of wonderful notes at the end, in which he explains kind of all of his references. So that's an interesting book. Another famous book by Ferlinghetti is Starting from San Francisco. And we all have different Ferlinghetti books. This is Open Eye, Open Heart. Yeah, so I guess everybody has their own little shelf of Ferlinghetti. John, yours must be extensive, huh? John Burroughs?
Yeah, probably about 20.
Yeah, right. How many?
About 20.
What, 20? Wow. Oh, man.
I don't have that new one John spoke of, so.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. I'm gonna try to find it. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah. Hey, Bill, this is Jim Baskin.
Oh, Jim, thank
Yeah.
you for coming.
Yeah,
Jim
I'm
Baskin,
enjoying
member
it.
of the English department, Joliet Junior College.
Yeah,
Yes.
as someone commented, the poems really take on a new life when you hear them instead of just seeing them on the printed page. And I had sort of just a random observation that you mentioned how Ferlinghetti was the first to publish Howl, and it resulted in that obscenity trial. If I understood it correctly, Ginsburg wasn't even at the trial, and Ginsburg wasn't on trial. It was Ferlinghetti that stood the chance of going to jail, which I found kind of
Yeah, because
ironic.
he was the publisher.
Right. I think it's
Yeah,
slightly
the
absurd.
actual case, Jim, it's from 1957, and it's the people of the state of California versus Lawrence Ferlinghetti.
I'll be darned.
Landmark case, huge step in safeguarding protection of artistic freedom.
Yes.
He is beloved by librarians who, in 1953, partnered with publishers to form and promote the Freedom to Read statement. It's no coincidence that in 1953, people were concerned about the freedom to read, and people like Ferlinghetti opened City Lights that same year. If you know history and you know those times, there were witch hunts, political witch hunts going on.
Yeah.
And it was a time where people really felt the need, including librarians and publishers, to protect people's First Amendment freedoms and access to information.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Thank
people
goodness.
don't realize how vulnerable publishers really are in terms of, their status in, the world and in the legal community. Interesting, James Joyce tried to publish Dubliners and had a very hard time publishing it in England or Ireland because it named specific streets and specific stores and people, and he was afraid of libel suits. So he wound up going to Italy and finding a publisher who didn't speak English and convinced him to publish the book because he didn't know what he was doing. And, so that's how Dubliners kind of made it into the world. So, you never know, what's happening.
But Ulysses had a famous court case too.
And Ulysses, of course, was a famous court case. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Sherry Smith, thank you. You're here. So many Chicago poets and poets from all over the country. And Martha and Len, thank you for coming. It just we all really appreciate it. And
thanks for having us, Bill.
It's wonderful that everybody is together and we're all able to kind of meet each other and see each other. I hope you'll everybody will connect in some way if we can. Michelle, anything else that you'd like to say?
Well, just a round of applause for everyone, all of our speakers and readers and scholars, students and poetry lovers who attended. Really, really gratifying to see on Earth Day and during National Poetry Month, so many people turning out to, give our respects and enjoy the work of Lawrence Ferlinghetti.
And this will be recorded and will be on YouTube, or how can we?
That's correct, and I put in the chat the JJC YouTube channel. Sadly, we have very few subscribers, so we don't have a very friendly channel name. So if you just do a Google search, JJC Library YouTube, you'll get right to it.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Thank you to the library for putting this on and putting it all together. We appreciate it. And thank you for all the readers coming and participating. And thank you for everybody in the audience coming and just joining us tonight. It's a pleasure to see all of you. I hope that at the end of the pandemic, which cannot come soon enough for me, we'll all be able to be in each other's physical company someplace around the country, the world, the globe. That we'll all be together. So I'm looking forward to
for inviting us all.
Yeah, it was
Oh,
really well done.
Really fantastic.
Thank you.
Shelley, thank you.
Alrighty.
for listening.
Thanks, Bill.
Well,
Thanks,
Bill.
everybody.
Thank you, Bill.
Yes.
See you.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks for the invite. Thanks for the invite. This was
We're
quite
Really
interesting.
enjoyed it.
This was fun.
Excellent Thursday evening.
good. All right. Well, everybody be well, stay healthy. And if you've been vaccinated, good for you. And if you haven't, I hope that you get vaccinated soon. So please stay well and stay healthy. Okay. Happy Poetry Month to everybody.
know.
And our paths will cross again in the future. And here's to Lawrence Ferlinghetti. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Good night.
Good night.
Good
Bye-bye.
night.
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 Bye.